and what a dummy!
Here goes Graham Hagana. Will he go all the way? Oh, Dan put out Lassen to put him over. And done it all the way.
Welcome back to the Fantasy Rugby Draft podcast. Thanks for downloading and listening. I'm Bruce Wilkinson, and unfortunately, I'm flying solo tonight. We really try and avoid this situation. It doesn't make for great podcasting, just having me sitting here waffling on in broken English. But the Mossman, obviously it's that time of the month again where he has to go and re-up his spray tan. So, as I say, we really try and avoid this situation. So, apologies. It's such a crucial week that we just wanted to get something out at least, and have a quick chat about the teams. It's Thursday the 7th of July. I was going to start out doing a bit of a Viking clap with Mossman, but I'm not going to be doing that myself. I'm going to preview semi-final week 2 for Fantasy Rugby Draft. It's do or die time. A reminder that tomorrow, though, is probably where you're going to get the most value out of us. You'll start bench questions tomorrow. Mossman and I are going to do the same thing as we did last Friday, only we're going to have an internet connection this time. And field your start bench questions at about 6:30 on Friday evening via a Facebook Live session. Didn't quite go as planned as last time, but I hope you guys got a little bit of something out of it anyway. We'll do about 30 minutes just before the game week kickoff. Game week lock, sorry. Okay, there's a few teams that have been named, so I'll just run through a few key bits and pieces for some of these teams. So the Blues Brumbies, which is the first game up, fairly settled team. Ihaia West starts again at 10. He's just been in the paper today that he's re-upped his contract, so he'll be in with the team next year, which kind of coincides nicely with the goal kicking being taken off him last week, which was completely blindsided us and most folks, I believe, as well. So P.S. Francis was taking the kicks. Now, I don't know if that's going to continue. He kicked 5 out of 6, so I suspect it probably will. Either way, you really can't risk Ihaia West in such an important game. And I know a few folks have been relying on him and perhaps have Deuce as a backup as well. So depending on what your waiver wire looks like or what's in free agency, you might even have to start looking at like Piers Francis or James Marshall. Obviously players like Garth April are going to be floating around and John O'Lance. But if you're in a very competitive league, they're probably already snapped up and sitting on someone's bench. Milani Nanai was really, really good again. We're really, really good at 15 as we kind of started the season hoping that he would be that 15 and be this player. But he chewed up the meters and he got that hot stepping going. So I see a little bit of the same. I think it's a bit of a tough matchup with the Brumbies. But Milani Nanai is always pretty good at 15. I expect him to go well this week as well. The only real change for the Brumbies is the number 8 and halfback. So Thomas Cabelli comes in. If you fell asleep at the wheel and you left him in your lineup, you actually got a little bit lucky because he came on and scored some points. So that was really good as well. Dargaville, Awong, solid. And, Aiden Toa, he does rack up some points, some fantasy points. I'm still not convinced at him at 15, but as far as we're concerned, if he's still doing this for fantasy, then, we won't really care about his actual rugby talents. But again, this is probably going to be a little bit of a tough matchup for him. I don't think there's too much more to say about that. Stephen Moore was obviously a little bit pissed off with how the England series went. So he played well the other night, and he was on the end of a couple of tries as well, or that front row was at least, which is great news, and I expect that to continue here as well. Reds Chiefs. This is the late game on Friday. Duncan Paia'ua starts at 10, and he looked really good. He could be the spark the team has needed. He's been a bit injured a little bit as far as I can tell. But I guess the main talking point from a fantasy rugby perspective out of the Reds last week was that Henri Taefu was taking the kicks at goal and not Jake McIntyre or not anyone else. So again, I expect that to continue this week. He had I'd say, I want to say 100%, but I haven't fact checked that. But he had a really, really high kicking percentage, and that was when Duncan was on the field as well. And I don't see anyone coming in and taking those kicks. So I expect Henu Taefu would be in there, and it's not a bad play if you're struggling around. I think there's probably better plays at midfield, but if you really just want to guarantee some points, he's probably going to go okay. And that Reds team did look a lot better. Jack Tuttle, first up, I can understand why he's a little bit apprehensive. I think he acquitted himself sufficiently, but it's obviously a big step up for him. For the Chiefs, they've made a few changes. So they've got Lachlan Boshier at number 7, and they've done a bit of a pocock and put Sam Kame at 8. Kurbalo comes in at 9. It turns out that Damien McKenzie did end up taking the kicks in Fiji, and I expect that to continue, even though Aaron Cruden is starting. Seta Tamanavalu and Anton Leonard-Brown, both good players as well, and the rest of the players are actually starting. I think, just as a quick point, so Nathan Harris comes in at hooker as well, so I think that's a fairly solid play if you're scratching around for front rows. Obviously the Bulls one is going to be high on people's radars with looking at the Sunwolves that they're playing, so that's a bit of a layup, I guess, for the Bulls, as much as a layup for them can be after some pretty horrendous performances of late. But the Chiefs front row as well, so because Nathan Harris starting, he does carry the ball a lot, and he does sit in those kind of Dane Coles, Cody Taylor type channels out wide, and he's got white boots, so that's key. You'll see a familiar face on the bench. Liam Messham's been shoehorned back into the replacement bench. Probably could come at a pretty good time as well, with Michael Leach out for this season and a few other niggly injuries that they've got there. That's probably about as much as we can say about that game. I don't think there's too many upsets. It'll be interesting to see which teams come out, whether it's the Reds versus Highlanders game or whether it's the Chiefs versus Brumbies game. Which side of the fence does it come down on? But as I say, signs of encouragement for the Reds, and it looked like Duncan was kind of steering them around the paddock a little bit better, a little bit more attacking minded. And just a quick note on Samu Karevi, who is just he's a man amongst boys. The sooner that he gets in the 13 jersey for the Wallabies, the better. Well, actually, not the better, but coming from an All Blacks perspective, we're cheerleading for Tavita Kurandrani or even for Lau, to be fair. All right, Lions Kings. The Lions, there was a bit of speculation that potentially they might rest some players for this match. Looking forward one game to the last one, where they probably would need a few more players against the Hawaris away, but they've decided to play everybody. So this could be we could have our first 70-point performance from a player here. Everyone's a good player in that Lions team. I don't think I'm even looking at players like Franco Mostert. Even Ruan Ackerman was pretty good last week. Ryan van Rensburg, obviously, in the midfield is a good player as well. Andres Coetzee is a bit tentative and looked a bit lethargic at 15 coming back, but he had the will and he had the want to try and counter-attack, so good signs there, and he'll be better for that run out. And again, it is just the Kings. The Kings made a number of changes, but I'm not going to get into them for too much detail. Just a quick note to say thanks to a couple of folks, or a few folks, that have done the testimonials. It's very much appreciated. I think the latest people we need to thank are Ed Pye, Tom Hiscott, and Arwell Jones. Thanks, chaps. Rebels Crusaders. We don't have a Rebels team yet. The Crusaders team was just announced. They'd like doing the Facebook Live thing at 5 o'clock on a Thursday as well. Johnny McNickelback. Great news. Great news. Not from just a Crusaders perspective, but for Fantasy Rugby Draft perspective as well. And this is a match where he could fill his boots. So Ndola on the left. Johnny Mackillai is a little bit harsh, and that pass definitely wasn't forward for Johnny Mackillai's try last week. But Johnny McNichol could fill his boots here. It depends. As I say, we haven't got a Rebels team, but there are a number of players that we're hearing may not make the trip across, or haven't made the trip across. I guess we'll see in a couple of hours. We record this usually about 6:30 on a Thursday night. Jimmy Tupou is at number 8 again. He's a lock listed out of position. So if you want someone to shoehorn into your lock position this week, he's a good play, as is Yannis Kirsten, and we'll get onto him as well. Just a quick note about Mike Harris. I think I'm done. With Mike Harris. He killed managers last week. He's done it a number of times. He's a repeat offender. I don't think the risk of starting him, I don't think the upside of the points he scores is worth taking the risk. It's just let someone else, if you can somehow figure out which game that Harris is going to play, then great. But I'll let you play Russian roulette, or let someone else play Russian roulette. I'm not going to bother having him on my squad, and I'm not going to have him on my bench. And it's a bit churlish to say this with only 2 weeks to go, but it's just a very, very frustrating play. And there was a number of frustrating plays last week as well. Mr. Marty Banks playing the Kings. I'm looking at you. Waratah's Hurricanes team. So it's a slight change. So Reece Robinson, after actually playing pretty well and getting on the end of a couple of meat pies, has been dropped, which is interesting. Matt Carraro comes onto the left wing, and apart from that, it's a fairly settled team. Callaway looked really, really good last week. We kind of touched on it last week. He looks like he's rounding into a little bit more confidence, feeling a little bit more at home in that team, understanding how to work with Bernard Foley in the counter and where Izzy sits in the counter as well. But no, there was one, his try that I don't think Nathan Major will want to see again, being the defensive coach for the Sunwolves. But nonetheless, you still got to score them. For the Hurricanes, again, I think you're looking at players like James Marshall. If you really are scratching around and you don't want to take that risk with Ihaia West, which personally I would not take, Julian Severe has been, let's just say disappointing thus far. And we see a return of Mossman's favourite, Willis Halaholo. Come on down. So he takes over from Vince Arso, and Ngani Lamape is actually a bit of a notable spot on the bench as well, which is good news for the Hurricanes certainly, and also for fantasy if he can get back in for next week. Via Fafita, very, very strong. He's listed as a loose forward. He's playing at lock. Oddly enough, he actually didn't start the game very well. He dropped off a couple of really poor tackles that he should have made. But you see how dangerous he is, and we've all heard the story about how he came back to Wellington, so I'm not going to bore you with that. But yeah, he's very, very dangerous player with ball in hand, and he's got top end for a big man. That's probably enough for that game. 4 Stormers. So, yeah, an interesting news that are coming out of Perth today, that Dane Haylett-Petty, Ross Haylett-Petty, Pet Cowan, I think that might be it. I don't want to start spacing anywhere else. Were involved in some after-match activities, I think you call it, in South Africa. Obviously, they sampled the high life of Bloemfontein as well. Ross and Dane got into a bit of a brotherly struggle, by all accounts, in the foyer, broke a vase. They paid for it. Actually, it was quite funny. The article said that Haylett-Petty had paid for it. Didn't actually say which one. So, and then someone got locked out of their room, and let's just say some of the corridor got a little bit damaged. So they haven't actually been stood down. They've just been wrapped on the knuckles with a bit of a wet bus ticket, and I think Dane probably would have been a captain had he not been involved in this incident. So they're basically saying, well, that's all of the punishment, is that you're not the captain. But he was lights out. He probably had the most reason to celebrate. He broke tackles, he counter-attacked, he got 1,000 metres, couple of tries. Really, really good form, Dane Haylett-Petty at the moment. There's not many outside backs that you'd want to start over him. He's just got that look in his eye that he's indestructible at the moment and anything's possible, and that's a great sign. Ryan Loveren's comes in at halfback as well. Not so much of an impact for him, more so that Ian Pryor goes to the bench. John O'Lance killed us last week in that he didn't take the kicks at goal and he scored some pretty horrendous points and killed a lot of people's matchups. But this week, I think the only complication could be Ben Tapua'i, but I expect John O'Lance to kick, I guess just like I did last week as well, but this time without Ian Pryor, I think there's a more likely chance that Lance will kick goals. And if you want anything else to go on, if you log onto their website and have a look at the banner ad for the tickets that they're trying to sell for the weekend, it's got him kicking a goal. So that's gospel, right? Bulls Sunwolves. Probably the biggest note out of this game is that Jesse Creel goes back to 15, which is fantastic. It couldn't have come at a bit. I'm pretty sure everybody has been let down by Jesse Creel. In fact, the folks who own Jesse Creel are probably not listening to this because they've been knocked out of the playoffs because he was a fairly highly drafted player. One of the first 3 rounds he was pulled, and he's been pretty disappointing in that 13. And the Bulls have been pretty disappointing overall. And I think with him at 15, playing against the Moondogs, this has got retribution written all over it. This could be peak Jesse Creel, I think they say. Giannis Kirsten, so he comes back onto the I think he might be playing 8, but I'm not too sure. Either way, he's back in the loose forward trio, listed as a lock. So again, against the Sunwolves, good play. And the same thing with their front row. So Adrian Strauss comes back in, playing against the Sunwolves again. Get amongst it. Sharks Cheetahs, we don't have either team yet or Jags. Hawara is Highlanders. But for the Sharks, we do know that Patrick Lambie is out this week. Still hasn't passed his protocol for his concussion. And Willie LaRue is also out this week. Need to check Andre Esterhausen, who he was pulled last minute as well. And also Paul Jordan looked like a very heavily bandaged knee, and he came off at some point as well. So please check those players. It's going to be a bit of a risk to play either of those two. So if you do have other options like Van Rensburg or like other midfielders, then potentially I would lean that way. But it is a good matchup for the Sharks, so you're going to have to figure out what your risk threshold is. Hawari's Highlanders, we don't really have too much information this week. Marty Banks went home. Liam Squire, I believe, went home as well, so I expect Dixon to start, and that backline will be back to normal, I would expect, with Faddis probably coming back into 13 and Smith going back to 15. Matt Faddis was really, really good last week. I should probably point out, actually, at this point that Peter Grant obviously listens to the podcast and he's a fan of Mossman because he was the reason Mossman won his Cheetahs versus Force Bet by a point. Thanks to Peter Grant's shank. Thanks very much, Mr. Grant.
That's news to me.
That's probably enough without too many more team news. As I say, we'll answer a lot of your start bench questions tomorrow that are coming through. We'll put them on social as well if you send them through on Twitter at Fantasy REG Draft. It's Fantasy Rug Draft. Or if you want to do it behind closed doors, then send us a mail at support@fantasyrugbydraft.com. Keep the reviews coming in on iTunes as well. A lot of folks have asked us how they can help Fantasy Rugby Draft, and this is how. To leave a review. It does make a big difference, and in similar vein to the podcast, it doesn't have to be all that serious. In fact, we encourage slapstick. As I say, tune in tomorrow at 6:30 again for your start bench questions. That's about all the time I have for today. Thanks for downloading and listening. I'm Bruce Wilkinson. He's not Nathan Mossman.
Oh, I think just with the uncertainty, it'll be Natai. It probably would have been Natai anyway, to be fair.
Go to the repeater.
What a bust here by Christian Cullen.